We've previously talked about the number word list and the importance of knowing the numbers in order, but we also mentioned at the time that it is rote. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're counting with any meaning. It's a skill that is sort of prerequisite to meaningful counting, but children at the kindergarten level need to build a foundation that's going to be robust enough for all future mathematical learning, and therefore they need to be able to do so much more than simply say numbers or count by rote, even if they're counting by rote as they point to things. They truly need to comprehend number, comprehend quantity. And in this presentation, we'll be really focusing on that. We'll talk a little bit about the number triad, which is that comprehending number doesn't come from any one thing, but it comes from bringing several things together, three things that we're going to try to pull together and make connections between. That's where the comprehension will occur. In this presentation, we will focus on pedagogical content knowledge and research related to number comprehension, which is the first part of the standard that's shown here. Understand the relationship between numbers and quantities. Children learn to say the verbal number word list before they can actually count out a given number of objects. Comprehending number is extremely important in the developmental progression. Even when we work closely with children and have evidence to show us how easily this can happen, we still quite often tend to overestimate what children truly understand when they give us rote knowledge. Certainly, we need to be careful not to assume that a capacity to recite numbers fluently and in the correct order means anything about whether they understand how to count or what those numbers mean. Because so many very young children learn how to count, often before they begin kindergarten, adults often assume that counting is an easy task. We underestimate how abstract the act of counting really is. Another common mistake that adults make is to think that the number word or the numeral symbol is the same as the quantity. We need to understand that number names and numerals are abstractions that we use to represent the quantity, in the same way that we use symbolic letters and combinations of letters to represent actual sounds. The letters themselves are not the sound. They merely represent in an abstract form the actual sound. As such, they are actually powerful tools for communication with other individuals. The abstract nature of numbers is what makes them powerful and what allows us to extend our initial counting tasks to much more advanced mathematics. For children early in their mathematical journey, though, developing meaningful learning of number will be essential for them to be using numbers in powerful ways. So what do I mean when I say that numbers are an abstraction? Well, we need to recognize that the word 3 and the numeral 3 is not the same as threeness. These are just labels that we use to recognize the abstract concept of threeness that unites each of the images on this page. Children will come to see as 3 as a label that they can apply to seemingly disparate groups that simply share this abstract feature of threeness. When they do, we might say then that they are comprehending 3. Of course, there's a bit more to understand as well. Eventually, they will develop a sense of its part-whole relations. 3 can be thought of as 2 and 1, or 1 and 1 and 1. They might see it as 1 more than 2 and 1 less than 4. All of these aspects of number comprehension represent core concepts for pre-K and kindergarten students. There are a number of pre-skills that are critical in the development of number comprehension, and we're going to take a look at each of these individually. These skills are best developed by extensive opportunities to count with guidance. Many of the concepts on this slide are further developed elsewhere in this PD module. All of these elements combine together to contribute to number comprehension. So while these skills are not the same as number comprehension, they do represent essential skills that are used in the process of comprehending number. We'll take a look at each of them now, beginning with developing magnitude. Children need opportunities counting in many varied contexts. While children learn the rote number sequence without a context, they cannot develop number comprehension without context. Therefore, extensive experience in counting real things is vital. Kane and Faulkner indicate that learning number identification without context does not support struggling learners. Strict memorization of number names when they are disconnected from quantities does not support comprehension of the abstract form. We've already discussed the importance of the number word list and the role that it plays in reducing the cognitive load so that children can actually count with meaning. Also, one-to-one correspondence. This has been mentioned as well when we talked about types of counting. One-to-one correspondence where child points to each object once and only once and uses one and only one counting word and then goes on to the next item and follows that exact number word list as they count. You can really begin to see as we talk about this how much coordination is involved in this mere act. We tend to think of it as easy since many kindergarten children already illustrate one-to-one correspondence when they arrive at school, but it's actually quite complex. Students who have this capacity have typically had much more counting experience than those who don't. So in a way, it's kind of an unfair comparison. You've heard repeatedly that all children need a lot of counting experience, but experience alone is not all that counts. What kind of experience will support number comprehension? Well, children need to bring 3 ideas into juxtaposition, and they need repeated opportunities to bring these 3 ideas together at once. As children count collections of just about anything that you can think of to count, day in and day out during kindergarten, they need to experience the physical quantity, counting it using the number word list, and then labeling it with written numerals. Although they need practice writing numerals, it is also possible to have them match the quantity with a card that has a written numeral on it. For example, a child may count how many candies are in a jar, counting out 7 candies one by one. Then they need to label the quantity as 7. This gets into cardinality, which will be discussed later in the module. And then they can find a card that has the number 7, numeral 7, written on it. Early supports can involve cards where the numeral 7 also has a physical representation of 7 objects. Finally, the child can make their own attempt to write a 7 on a Post-it note and stick the Post-it to the candy jar. This scenario describes how all of the number systems can be brought together to facilitate number comprehension. The actual quantity of 7 candies, counting out that list of the candies by using our number word list, and then by thinking of the written numeral, finding it, and then practicing writing it oneself. All of those can be brought together in the same task of counting candies. Here you see what I'm talking about. A center could be set up for children to count sets of objects, which could be in baggies. Once they've determined the quantity, they can say the number word out loud to their partner, find the number represented on cards, and then write the number for themselves on a Post-it to label the set. The research on this slide is reported in Calafidado. I'm pretty sure I mutilated that name. In the references section, she's written an article called The Design of Numerical Representations Based on Cognitive Research. Here you see a recognition that children's understanding of number is most often hindered not by a lack of knowledge, but by a lack of connections between the types of knowledge. So it's not that they don't have number knowledge, but maybe they're not making the connections between the numeral and the quantity and the number word list. By consistently and frequently making connections between the actual quantities, the verbal words, and the visual system of numerals, children's development can be fostered. The Schwertfeger and Chan article titled Counting Collections in the References section is an excellent and very readable article that could help you get started on how to build a classroom that is characterized by its counting of collections. Gives lots of management ideas and also differentiation ideas for working with children at various levels. This article can be purchased at the NCTM website, or if you're a member already, you can download it for free.